Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming out today. First day of orientation, super exciting, so welcome. Just give me a second while we get the PowerPoint pulled up. Hold on. If you give me a thumbs up in the chat or in the motions, that'd be awesome. Okay. Perfect. So let me get things started. So again, thank you so much for coming out today. I know it's the first day of orientation, so welcome to the Changemaking from the Student's Perspective, which is our first event out of 3 for orientation this week. So we're really excited to have you here for the next hour as we hear some great insight from some expert students and changemakers. We welcome and thank each of our guest panelists, who I'll introduce shortly. So, as I said, welcome to Ryerson and to the Ryerson Leadership Lab. Sorry, technical difficulties, here we go. So housekeeping, just to go over some things before I introduce the panelists. For accessibility piece, this event will be closed captioned, so you can change that depending on your preference. If you prefer text-only versions of the slides, please let us know and we'll be able to send that to you. We'll also be sending these slides and a recording in a follow-up email later. So if you need anything, please let us know in the chat, as we have some lovely staff that will be able to help you out. As you know, microphones and cameras, if you are comfortable with it, please turn on your camera, as we would love to see you. But please mute your mics if you're not speaking. I know there's been a lot of Zoom calls, so we understand Zoom fatigue and we understand your preference, but just let us know whatever you're comfortable with and what you're sharing. Regarding privacy, just keep in mind that we will be talking about some personal matters today in this meeting. So this event is going to be recorded. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask ahead, like put them in the chat. Someone will be able to answer them. And if you have a question directed to our panelists, just put an @ their name. So say, for example, you had a question for Susanna, just say @Susanna and then enter your question. With that being said, is there any questions so far before I move on? No? Okay, perfect. So let me move on. So with our land acknowledgement, before we begin today's event, I would like to give a land acknowledgement. We do this as a symbolic restorative act, one amongst many, and part of the wider and hopefully transformative reconciliation project here at Ryerson. So Ryerson is on the territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat. It's covered by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, Treaty 13, and the Williams Treaty. We are committed to honoring our obligations to these nations, treaties, and to justice for Indigenous people generally. In this project, we hope to do that by continuing to include Indigenous voices in our work. So let me introduce myself. So my name is Tamara. I'm one of the student staff here at the Ryerson Leadership Lab. I'm the student engagement coordinator. The Ryerson Leadership Lab, if you must be wondering what we do. So it's Ryerson's University's action-oriented think tank. We work to develop leaders and solutions to make progress on the most pressing civic challenges through leadership development, civic convening, and policy and research activation. The panelists we have today are a perfect example of some of our leaders here that have been a part of the Ryerson Leadership Lab as we foster the effort to build a new generation of skilled and adaptable leaders, change makers at all ages and stages to build a more trustworthy and inclusive society. So I'd like to take a moment to introduce our panelists who have joined us here today to share their insight on what we have for our student perspective. So let's give a little wave when I call your name. So first up, we have Susanna Lee. She is a 4th-year psychology student currently doing her research as a thesis student in the Anxiety Treatment and Research Lab here at Ryerson. She's also the executive director and co-founder of on that note, an a cappella group at Ryerson made for women, femme, and non-binary folk. Next, we have Joshua. He is a recent graduate of the Arts and Contemporary Studies, specializing in queer theory and culture studies. Joshua is the host of Divas Live, an annual fundraiser for Casey House and a queer event which provides a stage for all kinds of queer performers. Joshua is also the co-founder of a student-led initiative, Activate, which is aimed to mobilizing young professionals within various political spheres. He is a recent graduate as well from the RTA School of Media, who believes in an affirmative and healing power of queer and BIPOC representation within mainstream and digital media contexts. Kyle is previously the video producer for the online community RU Student Life and produced a radio show called at Supercut Live. If any of the three panelists would like to add anything that I missed from your bios, you have the opportunity now. No?
It's really exciting to be here with you all. So thank you so much for taking the chunk out of your afternoon to spend some time with us and cozy up with this really awesome chat with these awesome student leaders and change makers. So thank you so much for your time. I hope to have a fruitful dialogue with you all.
Perfect. Thank you, Kyle. Okay, so I'm really proud to introduce these folks because they're going to share some awesome tips and tricks about change making and how to balance it with school, and some insight on resources that are available here at Ryerson to support any of your personal change making efforts. So one thing that we're doing for orientation to inspire your own change making initiatives, the Ryerson Leadership Lab has prepared a $100 change making toolkit filled with tools to enable you to your own changing making, such as Desmond Cole's latest book, The Skins We Are In, to give away to one lucky participant. So we'll be announcing that at the end of this event, and we have more throughout the other events this week, so stay tuned. I also want to give a quick shout out to Taylor if she's on the call. She's in charge, or she's part of the group on campus called Amplify, which pretty much we're going to be partnering with them in the fall. But if you have any questions regarding Amplify, please follow them at Amplify Ryerson on Instagram, because they're a great resource on campus to connect with too. Okay. So after all that talking and all those intros, before that, I just wanted to let you know that we're recording this event. So again, be comfortable with what you want to be presented. If you want to have your camera on, if you want to just put your questions in the chat, totally cool with us, and we'll get to it. So we're going to start with our questions. So our first question is, what started your change-making journey? So we'll start with Susanna.
Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for having me here. Can everyone hear me? Is it okay? Okay. So sorry, the question, what started your change-making journey? I think this is kind of a hard question because even like labeling myself a change maker, it's like a very like large term, so it feels kind of abstract, but I always wanted to go into like a service profession since I was young. I wanted to go to med school since I was very young. That has since then switched to clinical psychology because I'm just really passionate about mental health. And so that is my change-making sort of inspiration, like what I want to pursue. I think so, like, I guess from a young age, like, since I wanted to do something that would like change people's lives, hence doing those professions. But so that's what sort of oriented me towards taking the Making the Future class, because the class is about affecting change in people's lives. And I always thought I had to do that like later in life, like when I got into grad school or when I like, like got a degree. And then I saw this class and I was like, oh, like I can do it now. Like I can make change now as a student. So that's why I wanted to take this class. And then I guess this class is what really started like sort of my practical change making journey in terms of like making a plan and being pushed to execute that plan. I'm going to talk about it more in like the later questions about what I actually did with my change making project in the class. But yeah, I think the Making the Future class is what really helped me to like practically make change instead of waiting until like I had a degree or until I was like in a profession.
Perfect. Thanks, Susanna. Kyle, if you want to go next.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Susanna, for sharing that. And I really like vibe with the relationship that you have to change making. It's a little daunting to be like on a panel and be called a change maker. I know there's a sense of like imposter syndrome there. And I love the relationship that you have to the beginning of the journey that you had, and talking about like your time with Leadership Lab is something more, planned and more practical. I'd say that my relationship to change making started really just out of like my space. I grew up, I'm a Filipino person who grew up in Scarborough. And so a lot of the people that I grew up with, are Black and brown bodies, occupy different like spaces socioeconomically. And I think as I was growing up, one of the major things that I'd realized was that there was a sense of dissonance between the types of people that I was like seeing succeed on the media and through representation. I'm really obsessed with television and film, and I never quite saw the lives that I was living with represented there. And so moving with that dissonance almost made me interpret the world in a different way. You can't look at the world the same way when you're excluded from a conversation around typical models of success. And when you don't fit the norm, it's a little difficult to just go along with how things are going. And so I think that's what really pushed me towards a change-making journey. So, yeah.
And to end this question off, Josh, if you want to answer it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everyone, also for your amazing answers. I think, like Kyle was saying, it is an especially kind of imposter syndrome situation going on right now. So I feel very lucky to be a part of this panel with everyone. Everyone's change-making activities have been really interesting to follow along with. Anyway, so I guess to answer the question, what started my change-making journey is kind of like what Susanna was saying, was sort of like out of like a necessity, like something that just, I felt like I needed to do something, create a space for people like me as a queer identifying individual. I did know that that there weren't many spaces for kind of weird queer art things in at least like the village kind of like gay spheres. So just as a quick backstory, also like I am a drag queen on the side as well. And my aesthetic is a little bit off kilter, I guess, for some people, but it is something very meaningful to me, and it was kind of what mobilized the change making that I wanted to do in my final year of my undergrad, and especially kind of going into like the democracy conversations we were having with Activate. It was something that was really important for me for first years, like those who are tuning in right now. Happy Frosh Week, by the way, or whatever. Yeah, to make sure that people were being educated about issues that were kind of outside of the sphere of heteronormativity, and things that people should be aware of when they are voting, and maybe voting for people outside of their own experience. So anyway, that's how that started. And yeah, I guess kind of going back to the whole idea of calling yourself a change maker is so weird, but exciting. I'm happy to be doing this kind of work with people like those in the panel.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I guess like the next question, I know that everyone's kind of gone through the realization that of not knowing, like not really knowing that you're a change maker. So I guess the next question would be, what would you say would be a moment that you realized you were an actual change maker and actually agreed with that and being comfortable with that association of that title, change maker? Kyle, if you want to start us off.
Yeah, absolutely. I think tying to the kind of dialogue that we started, I feel like, like being a change maker is an iterative process. It's not a moment that you start to realize. It's moments that build up that come up over time, and there's moments to look forward to where I think your change making style moves and shifts. I think that I personally feel that I am inhabiting a change maker self in the moments where I feel like I am advocating for the values that I have, the values that I have around, you know, the equality of queer people and Black and brown bodies and all these different things. If I can advocate for the values that I have for other people, then I can advocate for myself and I can advocate for the people that I love. And I'd say those are the key moments that I've been feeling. I know, especially coming from this, you know, this quarantine moment, and I know there was this moment in June where a lot of the conversations online were centered around the police killings of Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, and oh my God, it's so hard to say. Even there was an incident that even happened today. But one of those moments that I felt I could be a change maker was when I could hold conversations and challenging conversations with the people outside of online portals. One of the things that I really remember at the time was just challenging conversations with family and friends, and also just creating a network of support for the people that I knew were having a really difficult time. I had started a watch club called The Login during that time, where me and a bunch of our friends who were just like really, you know, in the grooves of trying to understand what was happening and trying to find our pace and how we could be supportive towards, you know, the Black communities. We wanted to start a dialogue around Black storytelling, and so we'd watched movies related to the Black experience, and had chats about it and talked about the ways in which we were using our voices and trying to be like activists within that moment. And so while I can't say there's a definitive moment that anyone ever feels like I am a change maker, I think that we tend to show ourselves in really, you know, pressing or pressure-filled moments that we are capable of change and we are capable of being a part of really fruitful discussions and dialogue around that.
Perfect. Joshua, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Kyle makes a really good point about, you mentioned having to have serious conversations with like your family about like your identity and everything. And I think that kind of brings up a thought, at least, of like, kind of if as queer individuals, as gay, Black, Indigenous, people of color, you're kind of thrust into this position as like being a change maker, because you're always challenging certain thoughts or certain ideas and having to be like this extra level of impressive, or I guess you have to work a little bit harder to make sure that things are being done. Obviously, as a white man, I have this level of privilege that I can't imagine what it's like for others. But I think that there is a level that we're always change making through our lives by being who we are. But I guess like to kind of like put a nice little story around it, I guess I mentioned it in the interview that actually Kyle had with me earlier this year, before the world ended. Yeah, I think it was the moment that I realized that I was able to become this like a change maker, a leader, a something of the sort, was the moment that my niece was born, kind of bringing in this little person into my life, into my family's life, into the world, and imagining what the future would be like for her, made me want to do what I can within my power to make sure that people were aware of, I guess, yeah, just to make the world a better place, locally, and maybe one day internationally, who knows? So that she can grow up to be whoever she wants to be and however she wants to identify and all of that. So that's where it came from for me. So yeah.
That's so sweet to hear that it touched. It comes back to the family, right? It comes back internally. But to end this question, Susanna, do you have anything else what was the moment for you?
I'll just add a little bit more because it's hard to follow those stories. But I think, like, as we've been saying, it's not like there's like one point in time when you feel like a change maker. Even Tamara, you're saying like, are you comfortable with it? I'm like, I don't know if I'm comfortable with it. Like, especially for me, like, I was honestly even surprised to be invited to here. So I think for anyone who's listening, it's not really like, there's not a point in time when you're like, yes, I like achieved this and now I'm a change maker. And like if you're waiting for that like time when you feel like good enough, like, or you've done enough, then like don't wait for it. Like you just unexpectedly like get invited to a panel with the leadership lab and like you're called a change maker. Like it's just, you kind of just have to like accept things and like not do things in order to be a change maker. You just like do things like Joshua was saying, and then like you be yourself. And if you are like doing things that are like you're passionate about and you're like pursuing things that you want to do, like then you are a change maker, as like weird as that is. I think for me, like you kind of realize that you're a change maker, like kind of what I've been like alluding to, when you see like who you're surrounded with, the people you're surrounded with, like, and you see how inspiring they are, and you're like, wow, I'm in this group of people as well. So that kind of makes you see like, oh, I must be impacting other people in the same way. I think like a story that like that comes to mind, even like being in this panel and like seeing like Joshua and Kyle, like, wow, like the things that they're doing, and like I get to be here as well, which is really awesome. Like one story is like, as Tamara said, I co-founded this a cappella group at Ryerson called On That Note. I was previously in Ryerson's only a cappella group, which is called Dynamics. But On That Note is different in that mainly it's for women and for non-binary people, and so it's specifically for people who've been like historically excluded from spaces. And so to make a space for people to just like, not even to necessarily be like activists, but just like for people to like do art and just to feel included and feel safe to do that was like important to me. And I wasn't really thinking about like making change when I made this group. I wasn't thinking about like, I wasn't thinking about like being a change maker when I was doing that. But then when I saw like how my group members just felt so free to like do music and to sing without sort of having to worry about being discriminated or worrying about like if their pronouns are going to be respected, like things like that, like it's kind of seemingly small things, but it's important. And so like I think when I hear my group members tell me how much they enjoy being in the group, and not necessarily explicitly say like I feel like I belong, just to see them enjoying themselves and to just sing together and like connect with each other in that way, like makes me feel like I'm doing something. So I'd say like that.
That's awesome. I think art has an amazing way to bring a community together, but also to get messages across, and being comfortable in your own skin is huge. But having those spaces on campus are important. But I guess my next question would be, I know that Kyle and Joshua have graduated, but Susanna, you're on your 4th year. How would you all like kind of say, how would you balance the two of change making and being at school? Since it's not like you can do one or the other, it's kind of in your day to day. So like if you could just kind of give some insight on that, like how would you balance the two? If anyone wants to start.
I can start. I think that's why making the future course is actually really useful, because it's part of the course. Like doing the work is part of the course, so it's not like you have classes and then you have this extra thing you're doing. It's actually part of your classes. So that's why I wanted to join the class, actually, was because it gave me the time, and not only the time but like the resources, because honestly like I didn't know how to be a change maker. Like I didn't know what that entailed. So like being like feeling equipped and feeling like you have enough time is really what the class gave me. So like that's why I think it's really useful to have a class at Ryerson that is like that, because it's part of your schedule.
Josh, you can go ahead. Oh, okay. He gave me the little.
No, please go, please.
So I'll take it. I'll take the finger wave. I would say I don't think those two are mutually exclusive. I think that you have all the bounds and all the resources to be a change maker within your school environment. And I think in a lot of ways, the campus environment, the campus politics, all the things that we learn are a microcosm of the quote unquote real world of change making, if there even is a real world. You can start advocating for the issues that you really care about through your education. You know what I mean? One of the major tips that I had actually gotten from, I think it was Kareem actually, who's in this chat, was you can inoculate, you can use the work that you do in school as fuel for your change making. What if you are really interested in the Toronto housing crisis, and that is your position as a change maker, that's what you advocate for, and you go through school through the complete lens of like, how do each of these different like classes that I take intersect with the Toronto housing crisis? How can I fuel my knowledge to fuel my change making, or how can I see it as both? And I think like there's never a wrong time to be a change maker. There's never a wrong time to critique the kind of learning that you're getting, to critique the legacy of colonization that exists within educational school systems. There's no time, there's no wrong time for you to critique like how like university is built on like a legacy of like commodified education. You can be a change maker through being a student. And I think it's one of the best things that you get the chance to really do in university, is to learn, is to be really, really active with the information that you're receiving and being vocal about it and being critical and moving things on campus in your own life and throughout all the other means you have.
Josh, do you want to say your piece? Are you good?
Kyle kind of said it all, so he covered all but that was very well said, Kyle.
He has to come in with that. He was writing what he had to say, which is awesome. I guess the next question would be, for those of you, like, what have been some of the change-making projects you've been involved in, whether it's, I know Suzanne already touched on her a cappella group, but whether it's past or present, what you've been doing during quarantine. Yeah. So Josh, if you want to talk about Activate and everything like that, we can go from there.
Yeah, of course. I think in terms of change-making projects through quarantine, they've been slow moving. And I think the biggest one that I was able to put on successfully was a show for, it's like an extension of the Divas Live show that you had mentioned earlier at the Boat in Kensington, which is a drag show and a queer performance art showcase. We were able to put one on digitally, named the Schmooze Cruise, which is like kind of the extension of Divas Live. And it was actually in support of the family of Regis Perchinsky-Packett, who was murdered by the Toronto police earlier this summer. So we were able to put that on successfully and kind of encourage. It was such a moment. I don't know. It was such a cool moment during the quarantine to be able to see all of these amazing queer performers come together for a unified cause that was really important to all of us, and kind of bring like just a moment of joy to it. Because especially early on, I don't know if anyone else felt the same kind of way, but it was really dark and gloomy for a while there. So I think this was back in March or April. Anyway, and it was such a great moment to see people just doing what they do best and expressing themselves in such a beautiful way for such a great cause, and to support a family that was going through such a difficult thing. So that was kind of one of the things, a good creative outlet. And then I've also been working with the Distress Centers of Toronto working on a seniors outreach program to encourage seniors to be a part of a peer mentorship program, where they're able to kind of volunteer their time to make social calls to other seniors who are in isolation, and just encouraging seniors to be a part of the conversation while also helping others who are separate of the conversation, I guess. So that's kind of been another thing that's been going on during quarantine. Activate actually has been kind of on hold for now, because it is meant to be a very social, interactive. It is in a social and interactive format. So hopefully once we're able to have small gatherings again, we can do another roundtable or something like this even. I guess we'll have to explore those options, but yeah.
For sure. That's so cool. I didn't even know you were doing that stuff. But helping the community. Kyle, do you want to go next on some of the projects you've been on or what you're currently doing?
Yeah, I think I touched upon it earlier, but I think especially during quarantine, I really recognize that, like, like especially like those earlier months, like April, May, June, we were going through so much, but we just wanted to be with each other. And so one of the things that I did was I touched upon it, but I did a watch and talk kind of like film club in relationship to like diasporic storytelling. And so like it was me and a couple of friends, and we'd gather like people to watch movies together and just have conversations about how it related to the intersections of our own lives. A lot of us were like second gen kids. And currently I'm working on a podcast. Oof, it's like weird to like say it out loud in the world, but I love talking through and using dialogue as a way of working through change and understanding what's going on in the world. And so I'm working on a podcast that uses the second generation like immigrant kid kind of like lens to look at different films and different TV and different cultural digital products in the world with my best friend Maureen Coular, who's a brand filmmaker. So, yeah.
And Susanna, if you want to, aside from like if there's anything else you want to add about your group.
I can add sort of what my change making project was in the class. So it used my group, which is really cool. Because throughout the whole semester, I was like, I don't know what project to do. Oh my gosh. And I was kind of like looking away from my own personal story, which is not the point of the class. It's to like go internally. And so I think Kareem said something along, he was like, we were in class and he said something along the lines of like, look into your own personal strengths and your personal stories. Probably way more profound than what I just said, but something along those lines. And then I was like, oh, like, what is my own strength? And then I was like, well, I am like the director of this group. Like, what can I do with this group? And I love singing, and what can I do with that? And so we made a video. I'm not sure if any of you have seen, they're called like virtual choirs. So it's basically like our a cappella groups, and like, we can't sing together, obviously, so it was a way to sing together, but like virtually. So we made this video of us singing the song called Safe Place to Land. And it was our group singing a cappella, and we all recorded separately, and we made this music video where you could see like each of our heads like singing, and we were technically singing together. And at the end, we worked with a group called HPAP, which stands for Health Providers Against Poverty, and we chose that group because they had very actionable, very specific ways they were focusing on the homeless community at the time when quarantine started, and the housing crisis, the shelter crisis, because shelters were overcrowded, and so it wasn't safe for people to go to shelters because of the pandemic. And so they were focusing on finding housing for people, homeless people who didn't want to go to shelters. And so we were promoting and elevating this letter they had written. So at the end of the video, we talked about like, what are the ways that you can help HPAP? What are the ways you can reach out? So yeah, that was the project that I did. And it was cool because it felt like I could still do something even in quarantine, even when we weren't together. So that was really cool.
Perfect. Thank you all for sharing different projects. Oh, and Braylon has linked Susanna's changemaking project in the chat, so you can definitely go check that out because it's really cool. So the next question would be, since there are a bunch of students here on the call who will probably want to get involved with the Ryerson Leadership Lab in the upcoming year, so from your perspective, how has the Ryerson Leadership Lab helped you develop to become a change maker and the change maker you are today? So we'll get Kyle, if you want to start this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's a loaded question because there's so many different things that I learned through my time with the Ryerson Leadership Lab. It's really difficult to just find one thing. But I definitely say it was really through experience that it was the experiences that I'd gotten to really investigate the different spaces of where power operates. You know, if you're interested in joining the Making of the Future class, which is SSH 505, in case you're interested, or if you're interested in a CAN study class or any of the talks that the Lead Lab does, they really inoculate and connect students with people in different and various positions of power. Like, we had talked to so many different politicians within the class. We had talked with different activists within the class. We had talked with different like people who were tenants of change, like people who were, you know, business owners or people working in NGOs. And I think one of the major things that I really can attest to is how I've learned as a changemaker, developed as a changemaker, is being able to connect the values that I had and the dialogues that I was having in peer-to-peer relationships or in my classrooms or like with friends, and transport them and connect them with actual spaces where power moves through, you know? Like, if you're in this room with, like, I don't know, we were for one of the experiences that comes to mind is like, we had gone to Chicago for the Can Study US trip, and we were like in rooms with like literally like Kathleen Wynne. It's like, you know, you get this access to people who understand power in a way that is so crazy and might seem abstract, and you get to say that you saw it for yourself. And I think that is one of the ways that I've really developed as a leader. It's like the experiential relationships that I've had with the Lead Lab that really helped me see that, you know, it's not as abstract as you think it is. And if you're willing to play, if you're willing to be present, then anything is really possible.
Susanna, would you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the most impactful ways of Making the Future class was learning about policy and affecting change through policy. Like, I honestly didn't know much about policy. Like, I'd never taken like law classes or classes about that. And so I think growing up, like, as I already mentioned, I always thought of affecting change through like directly, like as a doctor or as a clinical psychologist, like through like meeting with people one-on-one. And so I just would open my eyes to like how policy really helps to create sustainable change for so many people. And I had never really like considered that really before. And at least something that I would do, I was always like, oh, there are like other people who will do that. And so I think a specific example was I got to, through taking the class, you get like these opportunities, as Kyle said, to like go see speakers, or like speakers will come to class. And so I got to go to a talk with Christine Elliott, the Health Minister of Ontario, and they were launching a new mental health initiative called Mindability. And even though I'm in mental health, like, it wasn't really talked about in like my other classes, and it was really only even though I'm in psychology. And so it was like a unique opportunity to go to see Christine Elliott and see the policies around mental health and what is really happening, and like just to see like how it works to like launch these kind of services. And like I said, like, for some reason I didn't really hear about it except for in this class. And also, actually, it was interesting, as Kyle was saying, it was this room full of like powerful leaders and change makers, but it was also interesting to just see like who was in that room and who was invited to that talk, because I do feel like definitely, especially when it comes to like young people, the fact that they had invited us was interesting to me, because I didn't even know like young people and student leaders could go to these events. But also seeing like most of these people were white and most of these people were men. And so like it was just interesting to see like the benefits and to see what they were doing right and to see who was still being excluded. So that was a really interesting experience for me.
Josh, do you have anything to add from your experience?
Yeah, for sure. So my experiences with the Ryerson Leadership Lab kind of came about unintentionally. In my final year capstone, Kareem and Sam were my professors. So, and they are kind of the head honchos, I guess, of the Leadership Lab. And so I didn't do it. I didn't get involved with the Leadership Lab knowingly, but it's one of the things that I'm the most grateful for, and would encourage anybody watching today to find a way to get involved with the Leadership Lab. I think, as both panelists mentioned, it's kind of like a peek behind the curtain. Like it's a way to get young thinkers, young change makers, innovative minds and all of that kind of in a part of the conversation. And it allows young people who often don't feel valued as a part of the conversation to feel valued and encouraged to continue to enact change and do things to encourage others to do the same. Yeah, I think anyway, those kinds of things are how I feel I've benefit from being a part of the activities with the Leadership Lab. Even Kyle and I were a part of the mission trip in Chicago. And like you said, there were just so many cool people around that we were able to talk to, learn from, kind of pick their brain a little bit, challenge them a little bit, which you don't see often. So it's good. It's cool to see happening and to be a part of. And I'm lucky that even though it wasn't an intentional move, that I'm incredibly lucky that I was able to continue to be involved with the Leadership Lab, and would encourage anybody else to as well. On purpose.
Thank you all for sharing your opinions. So I'm just going to enter into the last question we have for the panelists today. As we have an audience full of students, what would be some opportunities you would recommend for students to be involved in on campus, and then any advice for the future change makers here at Ryerson? So Suzanne, if you want to start, or Joshua, if you want to start. I know that you guys all got thinking faces on, so whoever wants to go first.
I think I'll just talk a little bit because I don't know if I have that much I want to say for this question. I think, as I've already said, the class was really great for me, especially if you feel like you don't know where to start or you don't know what to do. It really helped me to focus on change making, while it being a class was helpful for me. I think honestly, a pattern that I've noticed is things that I clubs and initiatives that I tried to join sort of for the sake of almost trying to be a change maker and trying to do things that are almost directly change making. For example, I used to be in the Doctors Without Borders Club at Ryerson, and it's a great club, but I think I kind of joined it for the wrong reasons. It was more I was oh, this is something that's directly helping people, and that's what I thought it was, and it wasn't because I was necessarily passionate about public health or something like that. So I would say join things, not necessarily because it looks quite honestly, because it's something helpful for your resume, or it's more explicitly change making, but do something that starts with your passions and starts with something that your story relates to. And then the change making, actually more effectful change making, comes from that. I found making my a cappella group, I wasn't intentionally trying to make change per se or help people, but that's the thing that sort of resulted in the most change, because it started with me wanting to do something that I related to and I was passionate about. So yeah, just doing things that start from yourself and your own strengths and your own interests and passions, because that's what's going to eventually lead to the most change, and connecting with people that you relate to the most, which will lead to more opportunities to make change in things that you're passionate about.
Perfect. Josh, Kyle, if you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of opportunities to be involved in, I think it's hard to name exactly what you should be doing, especially in your first year, which is a notoriously challenging transitional year. I think it's good, at least for everyone watching, if you are a part of orientation week, get comfortable, think about yourself, be a little, be a little selfish at first, and then really dig your feet into the ground, and like Suzanne was saying, go off of your passions and get involved in situations that speak to you. It's like the Leadership Lab class, making the change, making the future, sorry. I was in the class, I should know the name of the class. But yeah, I think for me as a mature student, I didn't start university until I was 23 years old, 22 years old. So for me, it was challenging to take it seriously. And so it wasn't until my third year that I really started to take advantage of opportunities. I went on a placement in the Bahamas to work with the school for students with special needs. And that really like kind of woke me up to the opportunities that Ryerson and any academic institution could offer. So I guess like my advice would be get cozy, plant your roots into the ground, and then like, I don't know, like just get into it. Like just do things that you think can challenge yourself, but don't push yourself too hard to the point where you're going to burn yourself out either. So, and yeah, don't wait until your third year is another point, because I did that, and it's one of those things that I don't necessarily regret, but I do wish I had taken advantage of opportunities that the Leadership Lab or other bodies of, I don't know, social change at Ryerson offer. Anyway, yeah, that's my advice. Just do your thing and it'll come naturally, but also push people. Is that vague? I feel like I should be more specific about my thing.
No, honestly, I think it's crazy to see, like, being in my final year too. It's crazy, like, how people come into university and already like go-getters and super involved. They have everything going for them. I didn't get super involved until I think the second half of my second year, because I was overwhelmed. Like, I was like, oh my God, I could do XYZ. Can I do all three? Like, should I do that? And also school and commute and life. But yeah, like, Kyle, do you have anything before we move on to the audience questions? I think even though you think it's vague, it's not. I think it's important stuff that people should know.
I love being vague because I feel like that wisdom kind of transports itself. So honestly, it was not too vague, Josh. I would say that especially like if you're a younger Ryerson student, you're starting out your journey or you don't quite have your footing yet, definitely things to remind yourself is that you are worthy and you are enough. Those are two things that I hope to part like this chat with, because I think a lot of the times, like, we feel unworthy to call ourselves different things. I mean, this is a panel of change makers, and we had trepidation around calling ourselves change makers. But the reality is, like, we are enough. You are enough. We are all doing our best, and there's a change maker inside of you, if you believe it or not. I'd say, as it comes to opportunities, take them all. Like, I'd say that. I don't think I had many regrets about my university experience, is that I can say that first and second year, I definitely led out of a space of fear, and I let that fear overcome me and stop me from taking different opportunities or getting involved with the kinds of groups that I'd wanted to. I really just got involved with the Leadership Lab in my fourth year of university, and that I think goes to show just like how much of a process it was for me to overcome my own inner fears about really getting involved or really like entertaining myself as someone as an arbiter of change. But that fear will always be there. And I think if you really like work with that fear and operate from a place of like, I'm just going to experiment, I'm going to play, I'm really interested or really want to advocate for X, Y, or Z, there's nothing stopping you except for yourself, and you can do it. I'm like tripping, but that's all I had to say.
No, that's awesome. Okay, so let me share back my screen. Pull up the PowerPoint. Oh, of course, this is what happens. There we go, technical difficulties. Okay, perfect. So I just want to thank Susanna, Josh, and Kyle. Thank you so much for your wonderful advice. And now for the audience, we're opening it up for you to ask any questions to them. You can unmute yourself or put it in the chat. That's kind of the best way to go about things if you have any burning questions for our panelists before we leave. Okay, so we have one question from Kristen. So thanks, Kristen, for submitting the question. The question is, who was your most memorable / favorite speaker through the Making the Future class, since you all attended or were part of the class in one shape or form? know this was a hard one, but if anyone wants to go for it. Josh?
Yeah, I think the most memorable was probably Kathleen Wynne, mainly because I feel like, I mean, she had so many important things to say and a lot of interesting perspectives on situations that were so blown up in the media that kind of, anyway, I think that's why it was so memorable, was because she was the Premier of Ontario, and you're kind of like this big, like looming figure almost, and then to be sitting in front of you, in front of a bunch of undergrad students, was such a cool opportunity. And like to be able to ask her questions and again, like pick her brain a little bit, to really like see her side of the story and learn from it, was really memorable and cool, I think. Yeah. Anyone else?
I can go ahead as well. I was also actually gonna say Kathleen Wynne, but I'll pick somebody else as well because I have another person. But it was just like Joshua said, like it really puts it into perspective, like how cool this, like not just cool, but just like this class is making a space for students to be change makers, because like the literal Premier of Ontario is coming into a Ryerson class and like talking to you. So that's just like, it just showed me like I can be part of the conversation, and this class is helping me to do that. But my class, I think it was the first class where they kind of piloted the book, like reading the book club aspect of it, where we read the books of the speakers coming in. And so the author of Hello, I Want to Die, Please Fix Me. I forget her last name. Let me just check. I'm trying to search it up right now. Oh, Anna Mailer-Paperny. So she is a journalist, but she wrote this book called Hello, I Want to Die, Please Fix Me, about her depression and her suicidality. And so that was so impactful for me, because her book was a lot about like policy change and like making change in mental health through policy, and like she gave so many ideas for it, and just to see her speak from her own personal experience was really, really helpful for me and really, really impactful. To see somebody who has faced it all, and yet she is writing this book to help other people, and not only talking about her own experience, but also using like her journalism and using her skills to make change in that area. So writing this book and doing research and researching policies to make change. So using her strengths as well as her personal story and her career to make change was really inspiring for me to see.
I love that. Mine is like definitely tied to the power of story as much as Susanna's is. One of my favorite people that I saw was Sarah Perry, who was a global visiting fellow, and last semester is Making the Future. And she was the former speechwriter for a bunch of Obama's speeches, and like hearing her speak and talk about the transformative power of words and story to connect and unite people is really is really powerful. And so hearing her perspective was really awesome. And also my cop-out answer is like listening to everybody in the class talk. Like there are so many like student leaders that end up taking this course that it's kind of like got me gobsmacked thinking about all the different opinions and all the different views and all the different like powerful things that I've got to hear my peers say within the classroom environment. And so if you're interested in like taking this class, like you will be blown away just by like the power of the student voice, just as much as you will by all these awesome people that come in to speak.
Perfect. So looking at the time, I'm just going to move forward and end us off. So thank you everyone for coming, especially another round of applause to our panelists for giving your insight on change making. Like we are so excited to have you part of our community of change makers. And to our audience, thank you so much for coming out to our first event of 2 more. So as you can see on the screen, we have another event on meeting the core staff of the Ryerson Leadership Lab on Wednesday. And then we also have our info session for the Making the Future Fund on Thursday. To keep in touch with our panelists, you can see their @ at the bottom for Instagram. And then as mentioned at the beginning, we have picked our winner for today's event. So I'm excited to announce that The winner for the changemaking kit is Julie Mai. So congratulations, Julie. Again, so to stay in touch with us, please do follow us at RU Lead Lab on Twitter, Instagram. You can check out our website over there. You'll be added to our mailing list so that you can stay connected with all the activities we have here at the lab. And do consider joining us for the next 2 events this week, which will be awesome. And then we'll continue having some more events in the fall and winter of this semester. Like I said, Wednesday's event, you'll learn a little bit more about the leadership opportunities we have in the school year. And then Thursday's event is going to be talking about Making in the Future Fund, which successful candidates and applicants will be able to get $5,000 in support of a change-making project. And you can find the links in the chat. They'll be posted to see the upcoming events, and you can register there. And again, this event was going to be recorded. It has been recorded anyways. So we'll get this uploaded onto our YouTube, and you'll see it in your emails soon. I just want to thank you so much for coming out, and have a wonderful afternoon. Take care, everyone.